Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Good King Wenceslas last looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was cool, when a poor man came inside, gathering winter's fuel. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Sumo. This is a happy day indeed. This is one of those moments where I wish we were a video podcast so everybody could see that Sumo is dressed in a green and white furry robe and has a crown of what appear to be laurels around his head.
It's actually holly berries. It's hard to see in the video, but I'm wearing a crown of holly berries.
There you go, a holly berry crown.
Holly berries and evergreens. Yeah, well, this is my, it's Christmas in July. You know, here at MAPS, we are 180 degrees out of phase with the rest of the world.
That's truth.
And so when we celebrate with our Australian friends in the height of summer, this is our midsummer, like the movie, our midsummer. We're going to burn someone in a big pile.
Well, I didn't sign up, but hang on. This got dark real quick.
It got dark? Oh, not the video. You mean my talking? No,
yeah, your theme.
My theme. Yeah, no, we're not going to really burn anyone. I got this robe from a lovely Australian woman. She made it to me on Etsy. I don't know if you've ever, it was expensive.
What percentage of your wardrobe was acquired from Etsy? I'm just curious.
Some percent, it's one of the best places to get customized clothing these days. Like if you go out, if you go out to the store and you say, I want a Ghost of Christmas past robe.
That's why that looks familiar. You look like the guy from A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. If you say I want a Ghost of Christmas past robe at Kohl's, they just give you blank looks.
Yeah, I imagine.
Or Target or something like that. So you got to go online. But let me tell you, have you ever priced custom made velvet robes? They are not cheap.
Wow. Okay.
It was.
I believe it. I mean,
it was. This was but she was such a nice lady. She made it for me. I was like, look, can you make me a Father Christmas robe? And she was like, yeah, I can. She was in Australia. She said that's part why we celebrate Christmas in Australia at Australian time, even though they celebrated it December 25th, obviously, but it's summer for them. But this is summer for us. So in a way, it's like Australian time, if you think about it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense when you think about it.
When you think about it, but if you don't think about it, it's a little odd. But yeah, I wear this. Come Christmas time when I go to Christmas parties and so on.
Well, you look good. There could be 2 terrifying children under the robe. I mean, you're really pulling it off.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a big robe. I go to Christmas parties and I have a big Santa sack, a big red. It's also velvet, a red velvet Santa sack, and I carry chocolate, frankincense, myrrh in little bags, separate bags. Like you keep your frankincense and myrrh separate always. You don't want to mix them.
Yeah.
And sometimes small trace amounts of gold, because people get iffy. People get a little weirded out if you hand them like a gold coin, because you're giving them like $1,600, and they're like, I don't even know who you are. And then I also hand out, mints, peppermints, sometimes dowsing rods, sometimes pre-workout meal replacements. You know, I've had great success with dowsing rods. I found some weird like missing objects in homes. I can find more than just water.
Next time I have a Christmas party, you're invited. I just want you to know. Yeah.
Yeah, people react to it. Well, I would say either with well, if I wear it in July like I am now, mostly, and I walk around town, most of the reactions you get are confusion.
Yeah. But
in December, it's either joyful enthusiasm, like, it's like, oh, that's awesome, like, oh, great outfit, and big smiles, or a sort of what I would call maybe a tepid fear. Because, if you're at a Christmas party and you're just sort of there mingling about for work, you came, you're just going to eat some ginger snaps and see someone as sort of an obligation for 30 minutes, and then some big guy with a giant green robe and a wreath of holly berries on his head comes up to you and is like, 5 golden rings, and gives you some frankincense. You sort of like back off. It's a little scary.
So you wear this to professional Christmas parties, not personal ones, not just personal ones.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do actually have a big bag, like a big sack of frankincense and another big sack of myrrh, which was also not cheap, but you got to go all in.
Yeah, you do.
You have to go all in. You can't be like a miserly ghost of Christmas past.
No.
Because he had the big turkey leg and the all that. Yeah. But see, I'm going for that. Now you recognize me. It's Christmassy, but I'm not Santa Claus.
No,
right?
You're a different thing. Yeah.
I'm a different thing.
You're a Dickens thing.
I'm like something else. I'm like a Father Christmas. And that's important because after the Bigfoot show we did, I realized, to maybe some people, the idea of like Bigfoot as a forest commie is a little too out there. So I wanted to clarify it with Santa Claus by having a show where we start the show by proving that Santa Claus objectively exists.
Oh, okay. Before we get into that, I got a few announcements.
Sure.
So, one, good news, audience. We have just changed over to 100% telepathic podcast recording.
Yes, so that's true.
The sound quality should be a lot better. And I had a question from a listener who said, "Where is episode 20?" So the answer to that question is it's just look in the feed on your podcast player, and it's right there between 17 and 18 where it's supposed to be.
Episode 20 is between 17 and 18.
Yeah, I don't know why he's having trouble with this, but we welcome all kinds in our.
A lot of people don't have prime number skills.
Right. Yeah. So those are my two announcements. That we sound better already. I'm just find it so refreshing.
Yeah, we're using complete telepathy here, and to tap into the microphones.
Yep,
it's very good. Yeah, so I thought I would prove we're gonna talk about how yes, Santa Claus exists. That's obvious, but a lot of people still don't get it. But beforehand, I have a little bit of a puzzle. I'm gonna take off my holly wreath crown for just 1 second. I'm gonna metaphorically. I don't have one of these. I'm gonna put on my Sherlock Holmes hat.
Okay.
And I want the listeners to put on their hats too, because I have a puzzle to solve. There was so I have a friend. This is it's either a weird pervy puzzle or it's a supernatural puzzle or it's both. So I have a friend who let's call him Steve, and another friend that's called well, he's not a friend, but I know him, Ferdinand. So Steve and Ferdinand. I'm not using their real names, obviously. Steve and Ferdinand. And Ferdinand is the owner of a typewriter repair store, which already you think
suspicious.
This is a front for some sort of drug operation or something, because how many people in a city need typewriter repair services? Right, in the year of our Lord 2020. But he does. And that's always been suspicious. That's always made me suspicious of Ferdinand. But anyway, Ferdinand invited Steve over to this past weekend, ostensibly for drinks and, watching old sports games with Ferdinand and his wife at their house.
Yep.
And Ferdinand has a graveyard in the back of their property. Yeah. Already. So they have a house and when they bought the lot, it wasn't like really explained to them how far back it went. And it goes back and there's an old graveyard there, people in the 1800s, a few in the 1700s, right?
Wow.
Old graveyard. And so he's done his thing he sort of keeps it up. He mows the grass around it and like keeps the gravestones clear and whatever. So anyway, they were out there on Saturday and they were just talking about it. And Steve says, Steve is he's sensitive to spirits. And so he says, I wouldn't enjoy having a graveyard on my property, especially when I could see from the bedroom window. Right. Because then I would wake up at night and I'd see will-o'-the-wisps floating around and like the Grim Reaper and whatnot. And Ferdinand sort of reacts like, what do you mean? Are you too good for my graveyard? So anyway, Steve comes back the next day on Sunday and they're going to have like mimosas or something. I don't know. I don't know what people do when they get together and they don't have robes. But for people that don't get together with big fluffy robes, they do other things. I think mimosas and talk about, basketball.
Yeah, sure.
Politics, whatever they do.
Yeah.
So then, but this time Ferdinand is angry.
Oh, man.
Why do you think he's angry? Because since the time they were out there yesterday and since the time they get there today on this Sunday, someone perfectly above one of the gravestones has dug a very cylindrical hole about 10 inches deep.
Ooh.
And it's looked like it was dug with post hole diggers, except there's no like dirt around the hole, like where you would put the dirt, right? From post hole diggers. And inside the hole, there's like this blue powder in like a ring halfway down.
The heck?
Very strange, right? Very strange. And so then Ferdinand accuses Steve of doing it. And Steve says, well, why would I? What are you talking about? My crazy typewriter friend that's probably a front for the mafia or a drug running scheme. And he says, I wouldn't do it. He says, you wanted to come out here and look through the window at me and my wife.
What?
And he was like, even in the middle of it's like, what? Why would I dig a hole? Why would I? And then it gets very strange and they sort of resolve it. But Ferdinand, this is why I never trust Ferdinand. And you should never trust a man named Ferdinand, even though that's not his real name. I don't. So what could be going on here? Well, if I'm Sherlock Holmes, I say, well, the most likely explanation is that Ferdinand dug the hole himself.
Okay. Are you sure that Steve didn't dig the hole?
Well, no. Steve says he didn't dig the hole.
I mean, somebody that just goes around saying they're sensitive to spirits and sees will-o'-the-wisps, I think maybe might do something strange at some point.
Could be.
Okay.
Steve maintains he did not. So either Steve did it in some weird occult ritual or to really spy on Ferdinand in his bedroom.
Okay.
Which I don't think, just looking at photos of this thing, I don't think you could see very much. And then if you were going to do that, why would you dig a hole to signify your presence? And what's the blue powder?
Well, maybe he was cursing them. He wasn't spying on them. He was putting in some kind of hex on them or doing some sort of magic.
Or maybe so.
Or maybe it was unrelated to their house. He's like, hey, there's a graveyard that hasn't been desecrated. I'm a weirdo. I'll go desecrate it in the middle of the night.
Or maybe he's some blessing. The blue powder thing really throws me. I'm not sure what that could be. Like, what is a blue powder? Like a bright blue, like cobalt is sort of blue powder, isn't it?
Oh, dude, I don't know.
I think cobalt, but why would you put? I don't know. But if anyone has any thoughts on to explain this strange story that came across my my mind space.
Well, so if it was cobalt, that stuff is kind of radioactive, right? It has some radiological properties.
Well, there's some of it is.
Okay.
Some of it is.
Well, what if somebody was doing some metaphysical research with some sort of a sounding device, and they had to put some kind of signature below grade?
That could be. That could be.
Or Ferdinand wanted to psychologically torture Steve. And so if weird things continue to happen, maybe Ferdinand is a psycho and they want to drive Steve insane, and then they want to sacrifice him in the graveyard as the apex of their ritual. Yeah.
Right. They want to psychologically torture him to draw them into their typewriter repair cult.
Right. And then at some point they're going to take him out to the graveyard and they're going to kill him.
I mean, is it just me, or is owning a typewriter repair store a little suspicious?
No, I don't think that. Okay, that by itself is, I think,
how many
cool.
people need typewriters to be repaired that you could maintain a store that has employees?
So up until about 6 years ago, used a typewriter on a regular basis.
Well,
for work, professionally. So there are people out there that use them for very specific clerical purposes.
Okay. Maybe so. Maybe I'm judging him too harshly for owning a typewriter.
But he does sound like a freak.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly. if he sees
Ferdinand.
If he sees a hole in a graveyard and then turns that into "You're a peeping Tom," I think that's maybe an unstable personality.
Yeah. Like if you're like an 11-inch deep hole with a ring of blue powder in the middle, directly over center of a grave.
Mm-hmm.
Or the fourth, I don't know how many options we presented, but let's say the fifth option is that this is some sort of spontaneous spirit hole.
Okay.
Which is the least likely if I'm Sherlock Holmes. Because if I'm Sherlock Holmes, I'm looking for, normal material explanations, even though I encountered the Hound of Baskerville at one point, which was a somewhat demonic entity.
That sounds neat.
You ever read the Hound of Baskerville?
Oh yeah.
One time, this is interesting with Steve.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with Steve, and Steve, I told you, is sensitive to the spirit world. Well, one time he said he told me he's very freaked out one day when I met him, and he said, well, last night I woke up and there was a hellhound in my room.
Oh, dude.
And I said, what? And he said, yeah, it was like a metallic, sheening, shimmering, like sort of a glistening dog, but all black with glowing red eyes, evil, staring at me from the side of the bed, just sort of growling. Right. I said, well, that would be very upsetting. And he said it was. And then there's another guy there. Let's call him Aloysius.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephen Aloysius and me. And I said, well, black dog apparitions go back forever. That's what inspired the Hound of Baskerville. And Aloysius just sort of looks at me sort of funny, and he unzips his jacket and he opens the flaps,
and
he's wearing a T-shirt that says, it has a black dog on it, and a logo of a black dog, and it says, "Beware the Hound, Baskerville, established whatever year."
Ooh.
And I thought that was a very specific synchronicity, because how many people wear Hound of Baskerville T-shirts?
I've never even seen it. I mean, that's kind of a niche T-shirt.
Exactly. I don't even know those exist. You have a Hound of Baskerville T-shirt. There's not a lot of Sherlock Holmes tees out there.
Mm-hmm.
A. And then B, not specifically about the Hound of Baskerville, on the day that you just saw the black dog encounter that someone just referenced it. So I don't know. Steve has some issues.
That's weird. Hey, kind of on that note, did I tell you about my vulture encounter?
You did. We had an episode where I was talking about the decomposers.
Yeah.
Which will probably air before this episode.
Right.
And while you were editing it, you walked outside and there was a vulture on your deck.
Yeah.
Your virtual deck that exists in the realm of the clone mind.
Right. In my clonal mind, I exited my studio out onto my deck, and there's a little table, and there was a giant vulture standing on the table just looking at me.
Now, you say giant, how big are you talking?
Like bigger than a large commercial turkey.
Woo.
I mean, big vulture. Just sitting there looking at me, and I walk right up to him. So I'm probably within. I didn't try to touch him, but I was maybe close enough to reach out and touch him. And he just stood there looking at me for a while, and then I guess he thought I was a little too close, so he hopped up on a little bit of my roof that was nearby, and just continued to look at me for a while. And then I called my kids out, and we all looked at the bird, and then eventually he flew up into a tree.
I think ancients would call that a bad omen.
Yeah, I might be dead soon.
Well, I mean, I think it's more synchronicity that you were proposing. That's more of a signpost that we're doing good work here.
Oh, okay.
Because the cosmos is giving us a thing like, yes, you need to be talking about the decomposers.
Well, I just having just listened to that segment in editing, it really was it was a cool segment. I think it had a lot of neat insights for dealing with the world that we're living in.
Right. Yeah, we're doing great spiritual work here. At my places of work, when people get annoyed with me for not paying attention, I say, well, I'm at the moment I'm engaged in spiritual work. And they they understand, but see, your spiritual work is just as important, if not more so. Because you got to shift. We got to win the consciousness wars,
right?
As it's been said,
right.
There's a war for the consciousness, and we got to win them. That's why today I'm trying to show everyone that Santa Claus exists, and this is true. I'm not being cheeky. I'm not being like. I'm saying Santa Claus actually exists. And I'm taking a lot from this is a train of thought I got going on with Jonathan Peugeot, who I've mentioned before. He has a great YouTube channel. You can look him up. Is Peugeot like a Canadian O, like an EAU on the end of his name? PAG-EAU.
Okay.
He has great stuff. Eastern Orthodox guy. And then he talked about the existence of Santa Claus, and also Terrence McKenna did in the past. Decades before in a different way. And so I'm going to take that stream A and stream B and maybe add a third stream of like peppermint bark, and we're all going to run them together into a mighty rushing river of proofs, right? Okay. Into a mighty rushing peppermint river of merriment and jolliment. Okay. So first of all, what I need to do is, what you need to get through your head is that Santa Claus is an anthropomorphic mushroom.
I'm just going to write that down.
Just going to let that sit for a second. You there?
I'm there. We're having a little data rate. Why don't you turn off your camera?
Okay.
So what? Okay.
I think what I said was so powerful that it disrupted space-time.
It wrecked our data feed. Santa Claus as anthropomorphic mushroom.
I know. This is what I'm saying. You can, like, when you begin operating in pure logos, your logos affects the world.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. So you still have audio quality even though I can't see you anymore?
Yeah, I cut my camera off. So why don't you go back and just start with the sentence. Okay. Santa Claus is an anthropomorphic.
And first of all, let us bless the feed here. The telepathic feed, so that it is not overwhelmed by my logos.
Okay.
Santa Claus is an anthropomorphic mushroom. Number one. That's what you got to get in there. Yes. Okay. Santa Claus. What do I mean? Santa Claus is a mythologism of old shamanic paganism practices, continuing to manifest itself spontaneously in the modern world because these archetypes exist of their own. All right. You got me?
No.
All right, let's go through it. The colors. Well, see, I can't see you, so I have to make sure you're still there.
Oh, I'll try
The
to
colors. The colors. All right. So, what are the colors of Santa Claus?
Red and white. Okay.
Right, red and white. What are the colors of the Amanita muscaria mushroom?
Red and white.
Red and white, which is the most famous psychedelic mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that exists now. What in all of these cartoons and children's fairy tale books and television and what lives under the mushroom caps?
Fairies?
Gnomes, gnomes, fairies, and elves, the little people
Mm-hmm.
that live under that. That's because when you take it, you visit the little people, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's why that's there. Okay, now who works with Santa Claus?
Elves.
The little people, the elves, right? And they make. I'll get to what they make in a second. But how do you ingest Anina muscaria mushrooms? Well, you can just eat them, but they're slightly toxic. It's not very good for you. It can make you sick, and the potency of their hallucinogen is not very high.
Mm-hmm.
So what people in ancient Europe would do, especially in the far northern regions, is you would first get your reindeer to eat them in Anina muscaria mushrooms. Then the liver of the reindeer would process it and remove the toxins, and then you would drink the reindeer urine.
Are you kidding me?
No. You drink the reindeer urine, and that's how you would get the biggest hit off the Amanita muscaria mushroom. What does Santa Claus drive? He drives reindeer. Right. Everyone knows that. Okay. So under the mushroom is these little elves and fairies, and these are Santa's helpers, and they are the demon, and I don't mean that in an evil way. I mean like daemon, the daemonic artificers, right? They make things from the other realm and bring them to you from where? The North Pole. What's the North Pole? That is the Axis Mundi, the center of the world in all pagan cosmology, and still in the archetypal mind in Jungian archetypes and psychology. That's where Yggdrasil, the world tree, grew, the magic ash, right? And what do you do when you take? What does Santa do? What do you do? What happens if you take the mushrooms from the reindeer? You fly through the sky, at least psychologically, psychically. Right. And what does the reindeer carry Santa Claus? They fly through the sky. So you've got this red and white mushroom that you ingest via the vehicle of reindeer that makes you fly sky high to the center of all things and receive gifts from otherworldly elves who comes at the winter solstice when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. Make sense?
I mean, yeah.
Right. And where do the Anina muscaria mushrooms grow? They grow in symbiotic relationship with the spruce or fir pine tree, always at the base of the spruce or fir, which is where you find the presents, under the tree. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's all the number of correlations between the shamanic Anina muscaria mushroom cult and Santa Claus is so great that one is forced to say, I see. Santa Claus is this shamanic, otherworldly religious practice that is still taking form in the modern world. And it does so without anyone being aware of it. That's the thing. No one did it on purpose. It did it on its own purpose.
So, okay, why does that make Santa Claus real, though?
Well, I haven't got there yet.
Okay.
We're going to get there.
All right.
Okay, so we got Santa is a mushroom, A. Okay, but B, Santa is also Odin. Right?
Okay.
A lot of people aren't aware of this. The most obvious connection here is that, Odin, one of Odin's names is Yule Father, which is literally Father Christmas, right? Yule Father, Father Christmas. He also is the bearded wise father figure that comes out of the Hyperborean north, right? He led the wild hunt through the skies once a year during the winter solstice, which is where he would ride through the skies in this wild manic thing, very, very reminiscent of a reindeer ride through the skies, except Odin rode, Santa has 8 reindeer, and Odin rode an 8-legged horse.
Okay.
So just slightly phase shifted.
Okay.
Odin phase shifted into a mushroom. Right? That's the sound of a pagan god shifting into a mushroom.
I can see it in my mind.
Right. Okay, so Santa. Okay, so you got that. And then also the third stream here, Santa is also the last remnant in our own culture of leaving offerings for spirits in exchange for gifts. Well, that and the Tooth Fairy, I guess. So both the Tooth Fairy, like Santa Claus, on the night Santa Claus is supposed to come, you leave out an offering, milk and cookies, maybe reindeer food, to encourage the spirit of Santa to come and to exchange gifts with you. You do the same with the Tooth Fairy. You leave a bit of human remains under the pillow as an offering for the spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even though the parents do it, it doesn't. That is, you're still, the action is taking place. Okay. And of course, also most obviously, Santa is Saint Nicholas, right? Which is, Santa is Saint, and Claus is Nicholas, right? Together, who is my patron saint for all of the above reasons.
Mm-hmm.
When they were like, what's your patron saint going to be? Because you can choose it when you're a convert and not a cradle Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
It gets assigned to you if you're a cradle Catholic, I think, or maybe you pick it at confirmation. I don't know, but anyway, you don't have as much choice. And I was like, I want Santa Claus because he's a mushroom. And they were like, I don't know if that's very Catholic. And I was like, it is.
I'm sure that swayed him. Just relax, guys. It's fine.
It's totally fine. He's a pagan mushroom Odin character and patron saint. Saint Nicholas, great guy. Obviously, he did a lot of the things that we associate with Santa. He took his money to give gifts to the poor children. He patron saint of children. All these good things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you've got 4 different streams here making up Santa Claus. You've got St. Nicholas, you've got Odin, you've got leaving offerings for spirits and sort of an animism thing, and you've got Santa Claus as a mushroom. All right. So now that creates, how is Santa Claus real? Okay. Because all these things together create a very coherent, fleshed out character or being known as Santa, right? He has very defined features. We know what he looks like. If you say Santa Claus, everyone knows who you're talking about. We know what he looks like. He has defined characteristics, mannerisms. We know what he does for a job. We know where he lives. We know how he spends his days. We know who his friends are. We know everything about Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so he doesn't, as Peugeot would say, he doesn't exist on like the same level as like a coffee cup. But nonetheless, when you talk about Santa Claus, you're speaking about something, right? That is there. And it's a bit of a weird point to get across, but when you do, it sort of snaps in together. Okay, so when you go to the store, like at Christmas time, you see Santa Claus everywhere. Like he obviously exists. He's at every mall. He's at every Bass Pro Shop or whatever, sitting around talking to kids. And the children that sit on Santa's lap and talk to Santa are speaking to Santa Claus. They're not speaking to Joe dressed up as Santa Claus. Because if Joe starts talking about like his love life problems or the fact that he can't pay his mortgage or the fact that he has a cocaine habit he would like to kick, but he's currently jonesing for and waiting for his shift to end, the child will cease recognizing Santa Claus.
Right.
Someone else will suddenly be there.
Yeah.
Right. So, when you participate in the spirit of Santa Claus, you are acting as one of Santa Claus's body parts. Is this making any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So people say, well, no, that's just Joe. Santa doesn't have body parts. Joe has body parts. And Joe is that's not Santa speaking. That's Joe speaking. But you can do the same thing to you, right? You can say, like, if I ask you a question and you say, answer, I'd be like, well, that's not you answering. That's just your mouth answering. or that's just your ego. Like, do you see what because your being is not as self-contained as you think either, right? Like when you you have a picture of yourself in your phone or in someone else's phone, they have a picture of you, or you have a profile online. That is your being extending out beyond your body. Like when people see your picture, they see your profile, they read what you wrote somewhere, they listen to our podcast, they are experiencing our being, even though we're not like embodied with them right there. Okay. And like Santa Claus also comes on you, like he has a will of his own. He will come on, like you can choose to embody Santa Claus if you want to, right? You can, like I do, you can put on robes, you can put on a hat, you can carry the Santa Claus sack around and make a voluntary choice to embody the spirit of Santa Claus. But also Santa Claus can just come on you spontaneously. Like if you go to a party or something prompts you, and it says, oh, look, you brought presents. Oh, you brought presents. You come to the door and you might go, ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas, right? Or Merry Christmas to all. And you didn't choose to do that. You didn't have a precognition to do that. It was just the spirit of Santa Claus possessed you for a second. And this is the same way. It might make more sense if I connect this to, like, say demons, or let's say spirits. Like okay, say take the demon of like lust, and people say, well, that's just something that happens. That's just something you feel. It's like, really, or does lust have its own agency and will? Because lust knows exactly what it wants, and it drives people that it possesses to go and acquire it, even when they would rather not do it. Right. People were like, I don't want to do this, but then lust comes over them and possesses them and steers them to it. Right. And so you might say, well, my will is to do X, but then this other will comes over me. Right. And drives me towards actions I would rather not do. Like as St. Paul said, the good that I would do, I do not do, and the evil that I would not do, that I do. Same with hatred or anger or greed. Like these.
But isn't that kind of reasoning sort of removing your moral agency?
No, because because you can operate within the so to some degree, people are not there is a degree to which people are not fully responsible for the spirits that come over them. Sure. Like, let's say you witness something horrible, and it invokes in you the spirit of anger and wrath. Okay. Right. That then you're to some, like, we even make justifications for that in the law, like a crime of passion. Right. You're not as, like, say you walk in and someone is sleeping with your wife and you kill him or something. Well, we all say, well, that's sort of he couldn't really help that, or he's less guilty. Right. Or you say, and that's why we make a difference between crimes of passion and spur of the moment things and premeditated murder, because we understand implicitly that premeditated murder is your own will. Okay. I decided I wanted to kill him, and I worked through the things and I went and did it. Whereas other forms of homicide are acted upon you to some degree by other spirits. This is the basis for that law that come upon you. But you also have moral agency because you are responsible for the kind of spirits that you are capable of invoking. For instance, if you attune yourself, let's use lust again, because I think all of our listeners are probably children of the internet and suffer from this, because at the prime time of their sexual lives, the internet bombarded them with gigabytes and gigabytes of lewd images. So it's a big problem these days. But let's say we have So the more you give in to a certain type of spirit, the
Mm-hmm.
more attuned you are to that frequency, and the more easily that can come upon you. Which is why doing good and attuning yourself to the Holy Spirit makes you more capable of acquiring and manifesting the Holy Spirit.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's the same thing. And what happens with Christ, like when Christ ascends, Christ is ascending into the heavenly realms. And so this is how Christ crosses the barrier of heaven and earth. So he exists on earth as a physical human, his physical body, ascends into heaven where he can operate in this other Santa Claus-like mode as well. So Santa Claus has never had like a physical body that you could like punch in the face.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean he doesn't exist, right? But he like and to drive this point home, I mean like love exists, right? Doesn't have a physical. You can't hold it.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that exist that you can't physically interact with. You can interact with in other ways.
Does love have a will of its own?
Love definitely has a will of its own, for sure. Or say take Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse exists. Mickey Mouse doesn't, and Mickey Mouse fights for his own existence in legal court battles all the time. Right. Right. I mean, Mickey Mouse is the thing that's keeping copyright law in a 50-year stalemate, because Mickey Mouse keeps saying, well, look, if you get rid of this, then other people that aren't Disney can draw me, and then my worth is done for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so these things exist. It's like when you write a letter to, let's say, a city, and you say, dear San Francisco, there's too much poop in the streets. And then someone writes you back and you get an answer. You're not getting an answer from like Sheila, the DMV lady.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting an answer from the city of San Francisco, which is what the writer of Revelations is talking about, sort of, when he's like, to the spirit or to the angel of the city of whatever, right?
So what? Okay, so now I'm really tracking with this, because what you're telling me is that bureaucrats are possessed. Yes,
they are servants of the angel of the, like cities have an angel, like when John says in Revelations, to the angel of the church at Ephesus, right?
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So every entity that can be classified as an entity has an angel, by which we mean a spirit, a higher order thing that holds it together. If you can say of a thing that X, right, even if it doesn't have a physical body, it has an existence.
So does the spirit of San Francisco have a consciousness and will?
To some degree, yes. And just like, and you can see this on a smaller thing.
I'm just trying to understand the physics of this thing.
Yeah.
Is that will composed of the is it a democratic will composed of the individual wills of all the inhabitants and the bureaucrats in their various measures? Or is it a thing that would exist independent of them? Both.
Like when you take on this, if I want to resonate with the spirit of Santa Claus, I have to do certain things. I have to put on the proper costume.
Mm-hmm.
I have to act the appropriate way. I have to display the proper mannerisms. I have to hand out the gifts, right? I have to do those things, and then I'm being part of Santa Claus's body. If I put on a smoking jacket and have a cigar and clown shoes, and I walk around going ho 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 ho, I'm not Santa Claus. I'm not jiving with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, if you are embodying Santa Claus properly, then you likewise have a back and forth relation. You are affecting what Santa Claus is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how these things change over the years, right? So Santa Claus affects into you, you affect back into Santa Claus, and like this reciprocal feedback loop, which is why this is how Christianity works. This is why Christ can say things like, and I shall be in you and you shall be in me, right? Because when you partake of the Holy Spirit, when you're acting in the mode of Christ, in persona Christi, you are being Christ's mystical body, which is why he says, you are the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
right? You're being Christ. You're being an extension of Christ's being in the world. You're embodying Christ into the world, right? But also, when you do that, necessarily, you must, because this is the way it works, you are affecting what Christ is. Because if he takes you on into his body, if you're being the embodiment of Christ, then you are being, to some extent, Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And then your sinful nature is also imparted onto Christ. And so in order to make that possible, to unite he had to do the sacrifice to atone for your sins and take on the sins.
Mm-hmm.
So that was necessary in order that you could be his body. Right. And this is why other people you really can't do this with. Like, I can't be like, I'm acting I am part of Trump's mystical body.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work. Or I'm part of Smokestack, because you can't really act. You can't really take, because Christ ascending into heaven, he has the physical part on earth, but then he ascends into this realm where he can, on the same level as these other beings, these angelic beings, these spiritual beings, be embodied in a more diffuse manner. Which I realize is a bit, but so think about, like, so I said earlier that the spirit of San Francisco has a spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and this is why it's both a democratic amalgamation of all the people that live there, because it's a back and forth, just like with when you take on Santa Claus, you affect Santa Claus. When you take on Christ, you affect Christ, and he affects you. It's a back and forth, two-way street. Or is it that the spirit of San Francisco has its own autonomous will? And it's both.
Right.
Like, and you can see this, like, when you think about, like this, like, I take a country. It's easier to see with a country than a city, but like the spirit of England, that invokes certain things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a way to be English, right?
Yeah.
And then, but that changes over the years as the people that participate in being English bring their own idiosyncrasies into the spirit and mold it that way, right? But like, so like England has, like, and we even say this, like, like England is acting in her own interests.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
England has interest as a body, as a thing.
So you're saying when we talk about a country that way, we're invoking an actual spirit.
Yeah, it's an angel. That's why this is what St. Thomas is talking about when he talks about all material things are governed by angels.
Right. So are some of those angels fallen and not fallen?
Right, exactly. And some are like some are ambiguous status. Like, like currently I'd say the angel of San Francisco is pretty fallen.
Yeah.
But it can presumably be turned around. And so this is what you get at when you say, so like Santa Claus, it's obvious that Santa Claus exists because, like, when I talk about him, everybody knows who I'm talking about. You know exactly what it is. And he can take on body parts. He can affect the world. If you write to Santa Claus, you will get a response from Santa Claus. The fact that some person with another name wrote it doesn't make any difference. Santa Claus still responded to you in the mode of Santa Claus,
mm-hmm.
and you got a letter back. You understand? So
did Santa Claus exist before somebody fed an Amanita muscaria mushroom to a reindeer and drank its pee?
Well, yes, because linear time is an illusion, but no, at that present moment, it would not appear to have existed.
Okay.
Does that make, yeah. Linear time is always an illusion.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So that's like, so this, I hope this helps people see like what we mean, like because people will say these things like, oh, we're the body of Christ, and be like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, like, what is an angel? Or it's like, well, and so and that's why Bigfoot, being a forest spirit, a manifestation of the forest,
mm-hmm.
if you will, he can do things and he manifests of his own. Like, and there's not a few accounts of people on Christmas Eve encountering sort of spectral Santa Claus, just doing his own thing.
So now we've got Santa Claus and Bigfoot sort of being the same thing.
Well, they're not the same thing.
Different spirit, but
right.
An existent spirit with maybe some degree of its own will, manifesting in various ways. So, could a person go out into the woods and become a Bigfoot?
For sure. Well, you can embody Bigfoot, and this is what happens often when people do Bigfoot hoaxes. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's not uncommon for people to hoax Bigfoot, and they'll make a big plaster cast of a foot, and they'll make some footprints out in the woods and say, "See, look at my Bigfoot. There's a Bigfoot here," and to get money or drum up tourism for their weird campsite or whatever. Mm-hmm. You got an RV park, no one's coming to. You say, "Well, I'll just make some Bigfoot prints," and then they'll draw all the squatchers here, and then maybe that'll boost business, right?
So the difference between a real Bigfoot and a hoax Bigfoot is by degrees of its embodying the spirit of Bigfoot.
Well, hold on, but see, so you do that, but you know what almost always happens when people do that, and the people talk about this in the paranormal world is that sometimes you have to hoax stuff to get it going, and what that means is when you begin to embody whatever it is you're trying to summon, it responds and comes. So if you want more Bigfoot sightings in your area, if you want Bigfoot to show up, one of the things you might do is just start embodying Bigfoot around you, this is how summoning spirits works. You see, because the spirit exists, and then when you give it body in your local area, it exists more in your local area. This is how magic works. This is how all of paganism used to work. Mm-hmm. This is this ancient idea of how the spirit realm functions. Is that people would see, like they would talk about, like, say, oh, we're going to dress like Santa Claus today, or they'd say, Venus doesn't like X, or Venus does like Y. She likes when her penitents do this sacrifice and doesn't do this sacrifice. Jupiter enjoys this. He doesn't like that. And this sort of like bringing these spirits into existence through these embodied rituals does actually work. Mm-hmm. And so when you go out into the woods and you pretend to be Bigfoot, like arguably Patterson and Gimli, who did their famous film of Bigfoot walking through the woods, that's almost clearly a man in a gorilla suit that some people still for some reason cling to as evidence, nonetheless sparked widespread Bigfoot encounters across the country. Because
maybe the hoax film was a summoning ritual. Exactly,
it 100% is. When you do these hoax films, like that's why these and they don't. And then what I mean is, it summons it even if that's not your intention. Mm-hmm. Because what you're doing is, because Sasquatch was a spirit that existed, as Native Americans talked about him all the time. He had these things, and when you give body to when you give body to the spirit of Sasquatch through your own actions, you strengthen the spirit of Sasquatch. This is why the pagans always felt that the deities needed food to be refreshed. Because if you forgot to feed them, if you forgot to embody them through rituals for too long of a time, they would cease to be, or they would diminish into like a sprite or something. Like sprites and like these will-o'-the-wisps, they were often thought to be gods that were once revered that had been forgotten and diminished. Which is why you always had to sacrifice to your gods to refresh them, otherwise they would die.
Okay.
Right? I'm explaining to you our current pagan practice of Santa Claus, mm-hmm. which is a baptized Christian version of paganism. Mm-hmm. How the whole pagan cosmos works.
I mean, you're really just making me glad that my family doesn't celebrate traditional Christmas Santa Claus stuff.
Oh no, you need the Santa Claus. Santa Claus is great.
Okay, so let me just make some moral criticisms here.
Yeah.
So, children, when they are visited by Santa Claus, often display uncharacteristic levels of selfishness and greed and discontentment.
Yeah.
Because they fight over their gifts, or they didn't get the thing they wanted, or whatever, and sometimes display behaviors that I would say are uncharacteristic of a given child when the spirit of Santa Claus has, visited their home.
Sure.
So so I just wonder, like, if you're gonna start putting sentient spirits behind all these things like Bigfoot and Santa Claus, we got to judge them by their works, right? So
yeah, but Santa Claus works are great.
some of them are, or they seem great. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly nice to go around giving out frankincense and myrrh to people. I mean, that's fun.
Well, so here's the, it's like it says in the Old Testament. You shall not have any other gods before me, right?
Right.
Which just means, don't worship other gods where I can see. That's literally what that means.
I don't think that that's really what that means.
No, hold on, hear me out. Because God being a classic, as conceptualized in the Old Testament, a classic stern authoritarian father figure.
Mm-hmm.
The rule of every authoritarian father figure is, I know you're going to transgress, but be discreet about it. God isn't dumb, and he knows that his people are going to go do things they should not. But just like and God allows this for the same reason that every parent allows this, is because if you're too strict, your children fall apart and they go crazy and they go the other way. That's why these ideas they always come back, and the church has always had a problem with them for the same reasons that you articulated. But these ideas of carnival, of these big festivals where these things get inverted and people go wild, they always happen, and the church is always uncomfortable with them. Like in the carnival times in medieval Europe, what you would do is you get a guy to be the upside down bishop, and he'd be the bishop, but he would be naked, and he would be the fattest guy in town. Or sometimes he'd be like mentally retarded, and you put a bishop's crown, a bishop's mitre on his head and robes, but he wouldn't be wearing anything underneath, and he'd be walking around and go, "Oh, we all love you, aren't you so great?" People would. It's just making a mockery of the whole thing. And people would do their Mayday pole dances and all, because you can never stamp that out. That always exists, and so God is like, "Look, yeah, I know, but just don't do it like don't do it in front of me." Because. And he allows the children of Israel to do this too. They're worshiping other gods the whole time.
But isn't it like a fundamental biblical principle that we're always before God because he's omnipresent and all-knowing?
Well, yes, I know, but and in one sense that's true, but in another sense he, in a way, turns a blind eye.
Well, I mean, there is this, especially in the Old Testament, there were things that you didn't do in proximity to the temple or inside certain areas of the temple, or certain people couldn't go. It's not like God didn't know they were there outside the temple, but so, I mean, I get, like, there is element of that principle, but if things like Bigfoot and Santa Claus are embodying other sentient beings, wouldn't it be the task of the Christian to replace all of those things with Christ? Especially, it's like the spirit of a city.
Replace, well, not to replace, but to baptize into, because that's the thing. Like, when you go into, like, your spirit isn't destroyed when it's taken up into Christ.
Okay.
Right. And so this is like,
so you're like subsuming other spirits into.
Or they shall be one. They shall be one, even as we are one. That they be.
So Christ, in this sense, being like an overarching higher order of spirit, can subsume and baptize other things into it.
The Holy Spirit is the top of the pyramid that draws all to itself. And Santa Claus is a great example of this, because Santa Claus is a Christian amalgamation that has pulled up all of those pagan things from their depths into a higher order. He's a mushroom, the shamanic mushroom practice, he's animism, and he's Odin, and he's just right there, like, and then he comes up, and now he's an order principle thing that goes around working in the service of arguably the largest Christian holiday on the planet.
So
right?
we're so by doing this, we're sort of reordering the spirit world
Correct.
in proper, rightful subservience to Christ.
Correct. Yeah. And I don't know how you do that with Bigfoot, but I'm sure you can.
So you can baptize Bigfoot, and what else? Like, are there limits to this idea? I mean, could you baptize like Shiva, or are some of them just demons?
Oh, no, you can totally, because you can 100% baptize Shiva, because that was and has been done in Roman Greek paganism. I mean, you go to Renaissance art, right, and it's full of these syncretic pictures where, like, there'll be a saint, and he's being attended to by Sophia, the goddess of wisdom.
Right.
Boethius even wrote about this. Boethius, the Christian saint, he wrote about in his, or was he a saint? I don't remember. But anyway, he's a very influential Christian guy. He wrote in the Consolation of Philosophy, when he's imprisoned, Sophia comes to him and speaks to him about things of God, right, and higher order things. And you see in churches around the world, there's like all these, you see the Titans there. And I mean, even in the scriptures in the New Testament, it speaks of, for he has bound the Titans in Hades. Right? This is Greek mythology, the Titans, and they're being bound in the it's not saying they don't exist.
Well, if they're bound in Hades, that doesn't sound like they've taken up a baptized position into the celestial hierarchy.
That's true, but the Titans may have more physicality than most people are willing to give them credit for.
So the Titans are a different category of thing than a Bigfoot.
Maybe. I mean, there are demons that are probably irredeemable.
Okay.
But not all spirits.
So San Francisco being one of those.
Right. But like, I mean, just look at Renaissance art and painting and stuff. You can like Zeus and Mars and all these things were easily wrapped up into the Christian world without any problem. I mean, we even still have the days of the week. Thursday is Thor's day, and Wednesday is Odin's day. It's right, and it was never a problem. And you can put those together, and you can do the same. And in fact, you probably should do the same as a way of helping evangelize. You can do the same with Native American folklore and gods and goddesses and traditional practices. They can be brought into the temple. As Chesterton said, he said,
is this kind of like the Peace Child thing? Have you read that book, Peace Child?
No, I have not read Peace Child.
Christian missionary.
I've read about Star Children.
No, this is a different thing. Okay, so Christian missionary goes to some like South Pacific tribe, I think it was, and part of being a missionary in remote people is like learning their mythology and getting to know their culture. And so,
sure.
They have this legend of the peace child that will come and bring peace between the warring clans of the island, and kind of like a sort of messianic figure. And so the missionary says, "Okay, I got your peace child. He's Jesus. He came this time, and it wasn't just for your little people on this island. It's for all the peoples of the world. And here's how it really works." And it ended up being, a fantastic spiritual revival for that island, and a great triumph of the gospel. And so it just kind of makes me think, he takes the spirit of the peace child and baptizes it and properly orients it within the
Well, I mean, the same thing. I mean, Paul does this explicitly. He goes to the Romans. He says, "Look, I know you got your unknown God here. Let me tell you about him." Right? It's right there. And Paul's never like, "Look, Mars doesn't exist." He's like, there's, in some sense, these daemons, these spirits exist, but like they're not. That's not the ultimate thing we're looking at here. I'm going to point you to higher, and then those are going to fall into their place. And so you probably should do like, it would be perfectly fine. And for like Mexicans, and in fact, they do this, Mexicans to have their churches full of like, the Aztec serpents and eagles and Quetzalcoatl. Like if you go to Mexico and you look at and you go to their cathedrals, they're on the sides of the cathedrals. It's like it's the same process that did it in Europe as does it in Mexico, and that's to be expected, right? And so you don't be too worried about Santa Claus, but embrace Santa Claus.
So is one of the I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question.
Yes.
Is one of the points here that it's better, instead of saying no, Mars doesn't exist, it's better to say, okay, Mars exists to a degree, but you have to acknowledge the existence of Mars in the proper relationship toward the one true God and his order for the universe.
Well, yeah, I mean, Mars absolutely exists, for Mars is the god of war, and war happens and has its own desires, and it comes upon people, and even martial arts, like Mars is from Mars, martial. It's the same. Like these martial attitudes, and war is always the same, right? The weapons it's fought with are different, but it's always there. It always reoccurs, and to that extent, it's a quote unquote god because it's eternal, it's immortal. It's there forever, at least until
you stop feeding it.
Right, and you might, and that's one way that you might. Oh, but there's even war in heaven, so it's already, like Venus is the goddess of love, among other things, and so love always exists, and it always is going around. It always has its own will. This is why the pagan deities were associated with these spirits that could come upon people.
Okay.
Because you have Venus, the goddess of love, which is Cupid, that comes, and Cupid shoots an arrow at you. You don't go out intending to fall in love, but Cupid strikes you with his arrow, and the spirit comes upon you. This is how they would depict these realities.
Okay.
So Santa Claus is an anthropomorphic mushroom.
I'm not sure that you've convinced me, but it's very interesting thought. And it gives me context, like how you picking where you're going to live, even as sort of a thought exercise. It's like if I were to try to put a personality and some characteristics to the spirit of the city that I'm looking at moving to, for example, what sort of spirit would that be? You know, when I go to the grocery store, are the shopping carts in the corral, or are they scattered all over the parking lot?
Well, because you will affect the spirit of your city, but also you will be conformed to the spirit of your city. See,
that sir, is a very important point, especially for Christians, because I've been long arguing the fact that Christians need to have their own communities with their own culture, which is just another way of saying we need to be living in such a way that we're creating our own spirits of our own cities.
Yeah.
In your thought process here, that would be the kind of what you're saying.
Because look, if you move to, let's say you move to San Francisco, and I don't mean to keep picking on San Francisco. It was once a time very beautiful.
Sure.
I've been there. Yeah. I've been there at times that it was beautiful and at times that it wasn't. And it doesn't mean it can't be beautiful again. But if you move to San Francisco and you engage with the life, you embody the lifestyle of San Francisco, you will inevitably take on some of the thoughts, characteristics, ideals, and virtues of San Francisco. You can't help it.
Yeah.
That's why people in the rural people, this is a lot of our politics at the moment, are always like, what do these city people do? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But if you move there, like, this is why someone you grew up with in, say, I don't know, Oshkosh, B'gosh, Kansas or whatever, and they move to New York City and they totally change their personality, in 5 years' time when they come back. They have completely different political views. They have different, what they like. Their mannerisms are different. Just like if you move to Portland, Oregon, you will inevitably begin to compost your garbage and wear flannel.
Yeah.
right? It will happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. And if you move to New York City, you will go and, hey, what do you want about here or whatever, and you'll have some pizza.
Yeah.
And this is why these stereotypes from these cities exist, because the spirit imprints itself upon you.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
No. Absolutely.
You can't move to Miami and not become a drug lord after a while.
Right.
Or a Cuban. You eventually just become Cuban. This is a thing.
So
this
is fascinating to me, because in the Reformed Church, I think there's a pretty broad now rejection of, the kind of the rugged individualist, atomized personality, that just lives on his own before God without really any dedication to the greater church or even extended family models and all that stuff. Like, I feel like the Reformed Church is reacting to that and saying, no, you are part of the church. Your life needs to be woven into it in community, and we need to be providing for each other and relying on each other and all that good stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's kind of a dissonance, because if I, for instance, will then say, okay, good, so let's start intentionally ordering our lives to that end, to, as you would say, we start creating our own Christian spirits of cities rather than taking on the characteristics of a pagan city spirit. Mm-hmm. You get a little pushback. You're like, well, no, we don't want to
be extremists.
We don't want to be weirdos, or we don't want to start a compound. They're always like, oh, you want to start a compound? No, I don't want to start a compound. I just don't. I don't want to be.
He's trying to wake us.
I know, right? It's people always. We talked about this in the last episode. People want to put up a straw man. It's like a defense mechanism. But really, it follows from this way of thinking about a city and its spirit. It's like, what spirit are you going to be conformed to? The spirit of the world or the spirit of Christ? So.
And you can do. There's probably a time for both. There's times like Saint Benedict saw that the world in his time was so decrepit that he retreated into the woods and started his own communities. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a time for that. There's also you can rehabilitate a city. You can and what you do is you can't, like I said, you can't not take on some of the characteristics of your city. The spirit will imbibe you. However, you also inform the spirit of the city. And so one of the ways you can do it is you can take the good, like if you move to Portland again, let's say, mm-hmm. there's nothing wrong with composting and being environmentally aware mm-hmm. and all that. Like, that's fine. That's totally cool. Sometimes it's a little unnecessary. Yeah. But whatever. If you want to be green, we all live in our camper vans on the edge of the woods, and we do a lot of artistic painting and smoke a lot of coffee beans. That's totally okay. But you can do that, and you can order that towards the good. Sure. Like, you can take on the spirit of the city and start pushing it towards the good instead of allowing it to push you toward. And you can do this with anything. All the spirit, like.
So if we're looking at that and we're kind of letting
I would say Santa Claus is Odin that has been turned towards Jesus.
Okay, that's an interesting thought. Well, so then using these concepts of how all this works, you can maybe come up with a coherent strategy as to how to turn the spirit of a city.
Right, and because people don't think about these things in spiritual terms, they're always trying these tactics that don't work, like these low level. People are always like, why are things spilling out of control? And I'm like, well, you're not paying attention to angels.
So you could come up with a practical, actionable plan.
Yeah, angels are very practical because all physical things are governed by angels.
Right. Yeah. So from an evangelistic perspective, I can say, okay, we're gonna get a Christian population density of X in this region here, oriented toward these major community centers and traffic patterns. So that, our daily living in amongst each other, doing business, is going to start to create its own city spirit, right? Because we've done the study. We figured out you need a population density of X embodying these certain characteristics to create city spirit. And then we're going to start invading, for certain periods of the day, we're going to invade this area of the larger surrounding city until we start taking chunks out of their city spirit and baptizing them. You can totally come up with a plan based on this.
I think just watching you say that, I think one of the problems you may have in convincing people is you have wild eyes.
Yeah, well, that gets me into a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Your eyes get a little like this, and you're like, man, this guy, he's either onto something, or I'm gonna get machine gunned down by the FBI.
Yeah, this is usually where I lose people. Is right.
I think it's because, like, when you get into that mode, you're slightly possessed by the spirit of Jim Jones, but only slightly.
Just slightly.
Only slightly. You know, speaking of Jim Jones, he was one of my favorite cult leaders because he was insane. Have you ever listened to all of his recordings and stuff?
Oh, I've listened to some of them. He's nuts, man.
It was so good. My favorite one was he would get these people. I think this was during his stint in South America, and his level of brainwashing was just so admirable, because he would get there and he'd have this guy come up on stage and like they do some sort of sex act together in front of the whole cult congregation.
Yikes.
And then he would send the guy back down, and then Jim Jones would stand up, he'd get fully dressed again, and he'd pick up the microphone, and he'd look at him and go, "I'm the only true heterosexual."
Oh, man. I haven't heard this one.
You can listen to this audio recording, and he's like, and it's like that level of just like what you just saw versus what I'm telling you to believe.
Right.
It's so like, he's saying, not only am I not gay, but I'm the only one that isn't. And everyone else.
That is bonkers.
And that's how you get someone to drink Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
That level of, and that wasn't Kool-Aid, by the way. Kool-Aid gets a bad rap. It was some sort of off-brand Kool-Aid.
Like Tang or something?
Yeah, but even lower down than Tang. Like, their budget was not very high.
Yeah, I imagine.
But yeah, we'll talk about them more when we do our episode on American UFO cults.
Oh, cool.
Which will include the Heaven's Gate people, who still answer their emails, by the way. The Heaven's Gate people left some people behind that didn't go on the Hale-Bopp comet. Was it the Hale-Bopp comet? I think it was the Hale-Bopp. They didn't ride on Jesus's Hale-Bopp comet away into Zeta Reticuli. They left them here for evangelical purposes. I don't know, but they're still there, and they're still. If you go to the Heaven's Gate website, which is still operational, last I checked, and you go to the contact page and you send them an email, someone writes back and is like, "Oh yeah, well, Jim was a nice guy, and he."
Well, you should see if we can get him on as a guest.
Oh, that'd be great. The interview with Heaven's Gate people, and tell us tell us about. This is non-confrontational. I mean, I like Kool-Aid. And then we got him. We'll talk about the Nation of Islam, which is the UFO cult.
Yep.
Mormonism.
Yeah.
UFO cult. The Raelians. A lot of people know about it. The Raelians are probably currently the most successful UFO cult that no one's ever heard about. And that's because, though it started in America, it's really big in Japan.
In Japan?
Japan, which is one of the things I always wanted to be. I always wanted to start in America and be really big in Japan.
Yeah. That's a good...
But it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened so far. But maybe one day I'll be like Arnold. Arnold did that stint, Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he was just like in every Japanese commercial.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, look up if you want a good solid like 5 hours of entertainment. Just Arnold Japanese commercials.
Okay, I'll scope that out.
It's insane. It's insane. I was going to talk about near-death experiences today, but I think I took up too much time with Santa Claus.
That was kind of a rangy conversation.
I think so too. Yeah, we'll talk about near-death experiences next time.
We're at an hour and 18 minutes.
Yeah. Do you have a people skills today?
Not really people skills. I have been doing a lot of research on different kind of viruses, and I've found just some interesting tidbits that really don't add up to a whole segment, but we can just kind of talk about them because I do have the material here. So Epstein-Barr virus.
And look here. Now, do you want synchronicity? Attorney General Barr, Epstein.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Epstein-Barr. There's always synchronicities are everywhere because the spirits are operating of their own accord in the world.
Okay.
Just like the spirit of the decomposer is there, like the decomposing spirits that summoned a physical decomposer, the vulture, to land on your thing while you were talking about it. Like this happens. This is how it works.
So maybe Epstein and Barr are working together to give us all nasopharyngeal carcinomas and
yes, I think so.
And sap your energy.
When you went to Epstein Island and did what you got is mostly nasal pharyngeal viruses.
There you go. But so Epstein-Barr virus is one of the most common human viruses. I think it's something like 90%, 95% of adults have an asymptomatic Epstein-Barr virus infection. So if you've ever had 95% of adult, like all adults, have. So Epstein-Barr virus is interesting because you'll get it. You may or may not have symptoms like mononucleosis, which is what Epstein-Barr causes that. And then it goes, you don't ever eradicate it. It goes into one of several latent infections where it's present in your B-cell lymphocytes, but it's not really doing anything. Okay, it's just hanging out there. But there are 7 or 8 different ways that it can be reactivated and manifest itself as other sorts of problems in your system later in life. So some of the things that can activate it are interaction or the presence of other viruses or different virus particles, other changes in your body chemistry, also exposure to certain types of electromagnetic fields can activate and cause the expression of Epstein-Barr viruses and other viruses, but we're just talking about Epstein-Barr right now.
I'm looking at photos of it. It looks suspiciously like the coronavirus.
A lot of them, kind of look like that.
Why do they all look like prickly balls?
Well, the prickles are the things that enter into the other cells. Like, that's their little receptors that chemically interact with other cell membranes. So the more of them you have, the different kinds.
But the cold virus looks like that weird alien spider thing.
Well, no, I think the cold virus.
Or what is the one that looks like the weird alien spider thing?
I don't know. I think you might be thinking of HIV, but I don't really know. But doing this, just reading about viruses, and then in some other, and this is 2014, so this is aged a bit. But this paper was positing that up to 25% of human cancer is caused by viruses. And there are some cancers that you can take the cells and check them, and there is 100%, literally 100% correlation with the presence of some different sorts of viruses, and also some parasites. So there is a large amount of human cancer is related to and possibly even caused by transmissible diseases like viruses.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that for a second.
And if you think about it, it gets a little bit weirder because some of these viruses are definitely like lifestyle diseases, if you know what I'm saying. So, for example, Kaposi sarcoma is a cancer that has a 70,000-fold increase in likelihood among HIV-infected homosexual men.
70,000?
70,000-fold increased incidence in HIV-infected homosexual men. All right, so now we're in the realms of certain cancers are related to your lifestyle choices.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And as I was reading about this week, it really struck me because that's not the way that cancer is presented to us. It's usually presented to us as it's a thing that happens to people and we don't know why it happens, but many brave scientists are bravely working to save the day and donate to our research organization. But it turns out that there's tons of information about all these different cancers and why you get them that isn't really talked about in the layman's world. Especially in terms of preventative medicine and things you can do. It's just not there. So another one, there's a mouse virus called XMRV. It stands for, I can't remember. It's a leukemia related mouse virus.
Extra mouse rhinovirus.
No, but close. And so it turns out that this mouse virus can sneak around undetected in the lab, infecting all sorts of cell lines and cultures, and it can find its way into biological treatments, vaccines, all sorts of stuff. And then it turns out that so many people are infected with this mouse virus that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten except for their exposure to various biotherapeutic stuff. Because there's like a lab contamination issue with this virus because so much of the stuff is made by running it through a live mouse as your culturing medium,
right,
you know,
right.
Both for research and production. I mean, you could take you can have a vat of pureed mouse brain, you know, to replicate your virus, and then you make your vaccine. But the problem is there might be other viruses in that mouse brain that you just don't know are there because you haven't checked for them.
Right. And
then they also make it into the vaccine. And then, you know, I'm not going on this big anti-vax screed here,
right,
but I guess my point is we're swimming in a big soup of viruses have all these different effects and different ways to get them and transmit them. And then they interact with our environment in myriad of very interesting ways. And I feel like if you're concerned about your own health at all, researching things like Epstein-Barr virus or toxoplasma infections is a good. Yeah, cats are disgusting.
They are. Dogs are much superior, but yeah, I was thinking, you know, they present it like, oh, well, you know, cancer is what happens when you get a random gene mutation
which is crap. That is a terrible. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sequence them. Like we know, like this cancer has this DNA set in it, and if it were a random mutation, they would all have different DNA, and we wouldn't be able to taxonomize them.
Right. This is the same thing as my argument against people that are like dreams are random. And also, I was going to talk about, but I'll talk about next time. Near-death experiences are just random firings of the brain.
Yeah.
As it's like dying of oxygen.
No, as someone who's had one, I can tell you it is not random. Near-death experiences are legit.
It doesn't even make sense. Like random is like the static on a TV.
Yeah.
Random is coherent images and pictures and stories.
Right.
Like this is why dreams can't be random.
Right.
It's like that's not random. Random is like it's not. You know. It's like the fact you don't understand it, but like, yeah, it's like this. You don't get these mutations most of the time at random. You get it because little critters that are packed with RNA inject their DNA sequences into your cells, and they're called viruses.
Yeah. And
that's what causes a lot of these mutations. We have to have a war on viruses.
Right. Well, I mean, that's interesting. People need to understand a virus is often a gene editing machine.
Yeah, it's a little gene manipulation machine
that takes its DNA and inserts it into yours, and then that cell replicates. And depending on some other factors, the changes may affect in different ways. You know, and some of those ways are cancer. So cancer is not the result of random gene damage through environmental factors that you can't control or know about. A lot of it is due to some very specific transmissible factors, and in that sense, cancer is contagious, just not in the way that we would typically think of it.
Well, that may be why cancer is on the. I mean, people have always said that cancer happens. You know, cancer doesn't really happen that much in indigenous tribes. Mm-hmm. And people have always said that. Well, that's because they die, or because you were more likely to get cancer as you age.
Yeah.
Because your body's ability to cope with gene mutations goes down as you get older. Mm-hmm. And so people will say, well, they die earlier of other things before they can get cancer. But maybe, just like with the Native Americans encountering the Europeans, they don't live in these big groups, so they don't have a lot of virus transmission.
Yeah.
And so maybe actually the cause is somewhat that rather than just they die earlier.
And also maybe they're not living around those sorts of stimuli that would, for example, activate a latent Epstein-Barr virus infection and cause it to express as prostate cancer or something.
Well, yeah, Attorney General Barr isn't going over their Epstein cases.
Exactly. Exactly.
So they don't have that problem.
Exactly. And then you got to wonder the whole these tribal people don't live very long. Well, that's kind of nonsense too, because some of them do live a long time.
They do. I know. All these things that we say are just not true.
They're throwaway ways to give somebody the brush off when you're thinking about something that you're not supposed to be thinking about.
Yeah.
Like
so
cancer
true.
being transmissible. Think about, and then connect this back to my herbal medicine thing for a minute. Think about places in Asia where you've got people that are very poor, living a very on a very basic diet of rice and whatever else you can add to your rice. But if they have, a lot of these cultures have a highly functional cultural understanding of, what herbs you can go out and gather for free in the woods and add them to your food for health benefits. And there are people, it's very common for there to be 100-plus-year-old people living in these remote regions, in these villages, right? And try to live to 100 in an American megacity. I mean, forget it.
Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot harder.
It is. I found that it's the T4 bacteriophage. If anyone want to look, it's a virus that looks like a giant walking alien spider.
There you go.
But that's something we should look at. That's an area of research for MAPS and all of our MAP scientists out there, is bacteriophages, viruses that eat bacteria.
So the Ganges River.
That's what we need.
Did you talk about the Ganges at some point?
No, the holy Ganges River that's full of waste.
Well, it turns out it's holy because there are bacteriophages in it that eat the cholera organism and other stuff.
No way, really?
Yeah, so that's why people can bathe in the Ganges without getting sick, is because it's loaded with basically bacteria viruses that keep the cholera and other weird crap under control in the river.
I have wondered how the Hindu holy men get in there every day,
because it is filthy.
It's disgusting.
It's filthy,
right? And they throw the dead bodies in there, and they throw their waste in there, and it's just, the Hindu conception of holiness is such that you can have a holy thing and also poop into it. Yeah.
Well, I'm not a big fan of
trying to get my head around what they're going with there, but that seems to be, because and when we think of something's holy, you would say, well, keep it nice,
right?
And they're like, well, it's holy,
poop in it.
But pooping in it doesn't affect its holiness. And it's like, okay, I guess.
Right.
That's just, this is when we baptize Shiva. This will all make sense to us, I think.
Or we'll stop them from pooping in holy things.
Or we will begin pooping in things.
That's a bridge. It's a bridge too far.
Who knows what the
who's baptizing brings. Who here, Sumo?
Like I say, it's always a give and take. You just have to, it's always a give and take. This also goes into why God is masculine and not feminine.
Okay.
A lot of people, I'm not going to go into that, but the give and take is like God is the progenitor, the seed spreader, right? Into the world, which then brings to maturation the children of his spirit.
The world being the void, from which creation was called
I'm
forth.
not going to go. That's a whole other podcast, but it's very related.
Okay.
This is why people that want to describe God as feminine, it's like, there's ways in which, Jesus even does that. He describes himself to a mother hen.
Right.
So there's ways that, but also no. Right.
Well,
that's my answer to everything. My answer to everything is but also no.
Right. Well, it keeps you flexible. I'll give you that. So this has been it's been a fun conversation. I'm still not gonna teach my kids that Santa Claus is real.
Well, he's gonna show up just like your vulture.
Okay. Well, I did show my kids that the vulture was real, and I think they appreciated how weird that was.
One day you're gonna say this, maybe even today, and like just a man in a Santa suit's just gonna show up on your front door, like, oh, wrong house.
Okay, well, if that happens, I will definitely.
He's gonna give a little wink, and he's gonna touch his nose.
Okay.
Touch his big red nose, and he's gonna point at you, and he's gonna walk away.
If you do this, it doesn't. If you do this, it doesn't count. I'm just.
Yeah, no.
It has to be somebody else, uninvolved third party.
Right. It's brought about by the spirit of Santa.
Okay. All right.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho.